Hey friends, it's Anna. Welcome to another reading journal video where we're going to create some spreads about some of the amazing books I've read recently. I can't wait to review these books with you guys. There's so much to talk about, and maybe you'll come away with some new reads for your TBR. I'm also really happy with how the spreads turned out visually. Grab some tea or coffee, get cozy, and let's start journaling. I'm starting out with my cover page on this left side. This page is just purely for decoration, and I usually try to match the vibe or aesthetic of the books I'll be journaling about. So first, I'm using this beautiful vintage tape that looks like it's articles from an old botanical journal or something. This is part of the Petals and Parchment set from the WASHI tape shop, which I'll link below in the description box along with all the other supplies I'm using in this setup. Next, I'm going to pull a few bits of scrapbook paper squares from a few different sets I have. I got these all as part of the same pack on Amazon. I'm still going for a vintage vibe with this little postcard, and I'm going to introduce some pink because I think these will be my last summery feeling spreads for the year. Also, whenever we get to the next page and you see the book covers, you'll understand why I chose the color palette I did. I had originally come up with a cover page design that was blue and green, and then I went to print the book covers and they're all reds, pinks, yellows, so I was like, I need to come up with something that matches this very clear color palette. Cue this Floral Chronicles tape that is also from the WASHI tape shop. And I finally also just got a cutting mat, or actually it was gifted to me by some family, so I don't have to worry about cutting into my journal anymore. We're going to arrange all these elements together in the bottom left area of the page, and I'm using this Amazon Basics tape roller to paste in the scrapbook paper. This is absolutely my favorite tape roller to use in my journal. Now that we have the base collage laid, I'm writing out my title in a soft, not quite calligraphy font using this Tombow Fudenosuke pen. Normally in my reading journal, I create spreads monthly, so I'll have a May Reads cover page and reading summary, and all my book spreads are separated out by month. But life has been so chaotic this summer because of travel and moving that I'm a few months behind in my journal. So I decided instead of going back to create the last few monthly spreads, it might be fun to group the books I read this summer into different categories and create different sections in the journal based on that. I'm planning on doing a fantasy-themed group of spreads later on for all the fantasy books I read this summer, and then I thought I'd also make this group of spreads for just some of the best books I read recently that are more along the lines of literary fiction. I decided to title this Summer Reads, and as you can see, I'm drawing a few florals on the sides. I was kind of drawing a loose sketch of baby's breath with a few extra little sprigs, but I am going to color in the flowers a very subtle pink to tie them in. This is Tombow color 761. I thought they still needed a bit more color, so I'm adding some green to the stems with an Ohuhu pen, color 61. Like I said, I like each set of spreads in my reading journal to go with a certain theme, either based on the books or the season or both, and I love this floral summery look. A little bit light academia before I start doing some more moody or dark academia themed spreads for fall reading. We're finishing off this spread with some thin yellow washi tape and a few book stamps. These are from a silicone stamp set, so I'm using an acrylic block to stamp them on, and as you'll see, I ended up going with a different stamp than I originally planned. Adding some more yellow washi tape and a little color to the title, and that's it for the cover page. Onto this right side where I'm going to do a little reading summary with the covers of the books in this wrap up and some reading stats for them. I get the book cover pictures from Goodreads, resize them on Google Docs and print from there, and then I make the charts and graphs for the reading stats on Canva. After this summary page is when we'll start making the individual spreads for each book and get into some book reviews. I'm putting another strip of that Petals in Parchment washi tape on the edge of this page to mirror the other, tearing the inner side again, and we're going to paste the book covers along the border of the tape. Hopefully you can see now with these covers why I went with the color scheme I did. They're all very bright and warm. Not at all like the subject matter in most of them. I think I might have cried while reading every single one of these. Actually, not Lessons in Chemistry, but all the others. But that is not to say that these are not amazing books. I can't wait to talk about them with you guys. Now I'm cutting out a few more pieces from this Floral Chronicles tape again, and I am an affiliate with the Washi Tape Shop, so if you want to check out this tape and the Petals and Parchment tape or any of their other products, you can always use my code ANNABRUNS10 for 10% off your full order over there. I'm playing around with the placement of the graphs, which I'll add labels to in just a second so we can know what they are. Up top, I'm using some more scrapbook paper and washi tape as a base for a little header. I'm using my alphabet stamp set to stamp out 4 books since that's how many are included in this wrap-up. I'm including 3 stats. Sometimes the stats I record each month vary, but I usually do at least these 3 because these are stats I'm interested in seeing for the whole year at the end of 2024. The first one is genre. I'll label the title and then each section. 3 of these books were historical fiction and 1 was literary fiction. The next graph is for format. I listened to 2 of these on audio, read 1 of them physically, and did a mix of reading and listening for the last one. Then this bar graph on the bottom is for rating. You can see we only have high star ratings. 3 of these were 4 or 4.5 stars, and 1 was 5 stars. That one is probably one of my favorite books actually, but I would recommend all of these. I'm going to finish up labeling the stats and then add a little more touches of washi tape, and that will be it for the cover page. I can't wait to get into these book spreads. I love reading literary fiction and historical fiction because it's a source of entertainment, but at the same time, I feel like I'm learning and growing as a person. And if you also appreciate those types of books, I think you'll love the sponsor of today's video, Imprint. I very much value when the media I'm consuming is constructive and teaches me new things, so I've been really into this app, Imprint, which is designed to make important knowledge easy to learn and apply through bite-sized lessons you can do on your phone. They offer multi-day courses and individual lessons, and recently I've been working through the Be More Productive course, doing 1 lesson a day. I love that there's a focus on applying what you learn, and every day so far I've come away with actionable tips to try out. Like for example, I have started time blocking my tasks into 90-minute increments. They also have lessons on plenty of other topics like psychology, personal development, science, business, and more. There's so much to explore, but what's great is that all the lessons are beautifully illustrated and animated. As a history lover, I've been refreshing my understanding on ancient Rome with this visual summary of SPQR. The lessons are so engaging because the app was developed with a science-based learning method that uses visuals and text and interactive components so that even with a 2-minute lesson, I can truly understand and remember new topics. To check out all Imprint has to offer, you can go to the link in my description or scan this QR code on the screen to access 7 days for free and then receive a 20% discount on your annual premium subscription. Thank you so much to Imprint for sponsoring this video, and now let's get into our first book spread. This left page will be for The Reading List by Sarah Nisha Adams. I first saw this recommended by Bujo by Philo in one of her reading journal videos, and I'm so glad she brought this book to my attention because it was absolutely heartwarming. The story follows an elderly man, Mukesh, who is grieving the loss of his wife and turns to the library to find connection with both his bookworm granddaughter and his late wife who loved reading. Our other main character is a teenager named Alicia who has a summer job at the library, even though she herself is not a reader. But she discovers a mysterious piece of paper called the reading list and decides to work her way through the books on this list. Ultimately, it's about two lonely people and our full cast of characters who are able to find connection and healing through the power of books. If you, like I think most readers do, enjoy reading books about books, this has to be one of the best types of those stories that I've read. And you can see here on the spread, I'm actually recreating the reading list, so these are all the books on that list. This story was so beautiful, the characters were incredibly realistic, and the portrayal of how the fiction books they were reading affected them in real life was remarkable. Anybody who is a reader is going to connect to this story. This book made me cry and cry. I was so invested in the characters and their lives by the end. There are some heavier topics, even though it's an overall uplifting story, so definitely check the trigger warnings. I'll go ahead and say that for all the books in this wrap up because all of them have sensitive subject matter, but I cannot recommend this one enough. I gave it 4.5 stars just because it was a little boring at the beginning, certain points. This is definitely a slow-paced book. It's very much character-driven instead of plot-driven, but I think it's worth it if you can stick with it. It got better and better the whole way through. You definitely don't have to have read any of the books on the reading list, but you'll still get a great discussion of each of them, and now they all are on my TBR. But if you have read any of these books, it's really fun in those sections to see how the characters react and what their takeaways were to something you've read. I was so excited when they were reading Pride and Prejudice and Little Woman because those are two of my favorite books. The writing was wonderful in my opinion as well. Here at the bottom of the spread, I'm writing out two of my favorite quotes. The first one is, "Sometimes when you really like a book, you have to read it again, to relive what you loved and find out what you missed before. Books always change as the person who reads them changes too." And the second quote is, "Books aren't always an escape. Sometimes books teach us things. They show us the world, they don't hide it." Which are two lovely sentiments about reading. I'm finishing off the spread by using the remaining space to journal some of my thoughts, and now moving over to the right where we'll make a spread for The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. This book has been on my radar for several years, ever since I read The Nightingale by her, which was an amazing book. I definitely recommend that one as well. I knew this title was one of her other popular works, and it was not what I was expecting, but it was really good. This book also starts off a little slow, but if you hold on, the middle and ending plots are insane. The story is about the Albright family who moves to live off the grid in Alaska in the 1970s. The father, Ernst, is a former POW from the Vietnam War who is struggling with a lot of inner demons, and our main character is his teenage daughter, Lenny, who is now forced to grow up in the beautiful but wild Alaska with her turbulent family. I'll read part of the synopsis from Goodreads because I think that puts it perfectly. In this unforgettable portrait of human frailty and resilience, Kristen Hanna reveals the indomitable character of the modern American pioneer and the spirit of a vanishing Alaska, a place of incomparable beauty and danger. The Great Alone is a daring, beautiful, stay-up-all-night story about love and loss, the fight for survival, and the wildness that lives in both man and nature. This book was really captivating because of the setting. Not only did Alaska come to life, the description of them building their homestead, the day-to-day of them trying to survive in this environment, but also this time period in history. I haven't read a lot of historical fiction that takes place after like the 1960s or so, but the political and social climate of America during the 70s was very interesting, and it was fascinating to see how that really affected Lenny's family. The characters in this book, the family dynamics in this book were really complex and handled with a lot of care, I think. I also love Kristen Hanna's writing. It was heartbreaking and at times heartwarming. I read this on a plane and I couldn't help but just sit there and try to cry as inconspicuously as possible. I'm definitely planning on reading more of her books because we're 2 for 2 on them being really good. As with all the books in this wrap up, let me know if you've read this one and what your thoughts were. I would love to talk more about it in the comments, or let me know if you're planning on reading any of these or have any good book recommendations for me based on this wrap up. Flipping the page, this next spread is for our 5-star book, one of my all-time favorite World War II historical fiction books. This is Beneath a Scarlet Sky by Mark Sullivan, and this was actually a reread. I first read this book in 2022, I think, and I think about it so often. So when it came to be my turn again to pick the book for the book club I'm in, I decided on this one so I could share this story with my friends and read it with them this time. So I'm flipping back to my 2024 journal setup because I have a spread for our book club reads, and I'm going to paste in this cover here. Like I said, this is a World War II historical fiction, and what's a little unique about this one is it's set in Italy. If you also read a lot of World War II fiction, I'm guessing you've probably had a similar experience as me where most of the books that are popular are set in France, and this is the first and only actually that I've come across so far that takes place in Italy, which was so fascinating to learn more about the history of Italy during the war because they of course had their own fascist regime and dictator to contend with. The political landscape was very complex, and I enjoyed getting to learn a little more about Italy's history. It was also cool to see a little insight into what the Catholic Church and the Vatican was doing during the war. So the story follows Pino, an Italian teenager living in Milan, as he gets involved in the resistance, both in helping Jews escape over the Alps and eventually to spying on the German high command. What's incredible is that this is based on a true story. So Pino Lea was a real person that the author interviewed and wrote this book based on those interviews and his own research. And of course, some artistic liberties. We can never confuse historical fiction with exact history. But as with all World War II stories I've read, this book just amazes me with the bravery and the kindness of common people in the face of war and horrific injustices. It also showed all shades of the human heart, evil versus opportunism, and is there a difference in some cases, terrible acts born out of fear and the need to survive, and then completely selfless acts that really make you think, could I do that if I was faced with this situation? We had a lot of really interesting conversations in book club. The plot of this book will definitely keep you hooked, but I think we spent most time discussing the characters. Like I said, this is a book that really stuck with me. I thought about it for a long time after I read it and still think about it to this day. It really makes you reflect on the human capacity for incredible evil, but also incredible good. On to our last spread and book for this wrap up. I finally got around to reading Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmus. This was Barnes & Noble's 2022 Book of the Year, I think, and I know it was hugely popular on social media, so a lot of you guys might have read this one already. In case you haven't, this story is about chemist Elizabeth Zott as she navigates being a woman in STEM in the 1960s. There is a romance, which is really sweet. There is balancing being a working mother. There are unexpected career curveballs, like Elizabeth becoming the reluctant star of a hugely successful cooking show. And best of all, there is a dog whose perspective we get, and he was by far my favorite character, even though it was a little bit bizarre that I was suddenly getting the POV of a dog. There were a lot of things I loved about this book, and there were a few things that annoyed me too, but overall I thought the premise was really great. It was so disturbing, but also really eye-opening to imagine what it must have been like for a woman to build a career in science during that time when it was such a male-dominated field. I mean, it still is today, but I mean, especially 60 years ago. I liked the focus of the science behind cooking and how Elizabeth brought her chemistry expertise to the cooking show. That was fun to read about during the episode she would film, especially as a dietitian myself. I have studied food science, that's right up my area of expertise. But it was a double-edged sword because I didn't love just a few of the things she said about nutrition, but we won't get into that. The things that I struggled with, one was the characters. Elizabeth wasn't my favorite protagonist. I don't know if it was her voice or the author's voice or both, but it felt a little too pretentious for my personal liking. And I feel like my second point kind of goes along with this. I felt there was a lot of showing instead of telling. I love the theme of women's rights, and I feel like this story was a perfect vehicle to discuss it, but it's still a fiction book, so I want to read about a character and the situations they're in and then draw my own conclusions from that story. Even when I'm agreeing with the themes an author is trying to portray, I always appreciate a little subtlety and being able to get to that conclusion on my own and not feeling like I'm being lectured to. I hope that makes sense. But even with a few gripes, I thought the premise of the book was fantastic. I was still rooting for Elizabeth and all our other protagonists, and I think it's great that we have books like this that get to be entertainment, but also an opportunity to reflect on important issues like women's rights. And that completes this reading journal update with some of the best books I've read lately. We'll do a final flip through of the spreads. Again, please let me know if you've read any of these and your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed following along and creating some journal spreads with me. I'll see you again soon, but in the meantime, happy reading.